All right, welcome back. At the end of June, the comics industry lost one of the great artists in Joe Sinnott, sorry, and he was also very active up here in the Albany area with the cons and all that. And so I thought I'd bring in somebody to talk about him. It's Tim. I'm going to mess up his name, so let me go ahead and bring him in. Then I can mess up his name. It's Tim Lasiuta.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, good. I didn't mess it up. And he wrote a couple books about Joe.
I have indeed. I was honored to write his official biography, I guess, which is now officially sold out, which is excellent. It's out of print, and you can buy digital copies from TwoMorrows at $7. That's my shameless plug for TwoMorrows. But I'm very thankful for them because it just so happened that they picked me and Joe picked me, and the rest is history, which is awesome.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about more of that here in a few minutes. But how did you first get in? Do you remember the first comic you read, or the one that kind of got you hooked?
I would probably say it was a Lone Ranger in the attic of the house that we used to live in. My dad had a box of comics that didn't get destroyed in a flood. And in that box was early Batman's number 61, 81, 83, 84, Jughead number 1, a few Lone Rangers, some Gene Autry, some Bugs Bunnies. And my first comic was probably a Lone Ranger.
Okay.
I probably can't. I'm very likely in the probably the 80s, 80, 85 range for the numbers.
And was that the one that kind of got you hooked on the medium? Or
it got me hooked on the Lone Ranger, that's for sure. There was always Mad Magazine around the house, and my dad bought comics as a kid, obviously, and later as an adult he bought them for us. He must have read them too, because he bought them even when we were kids. So he must have been reading comics at school. I don't know. But that's okay.
Yeah.
That's just the way it works.
Let's kind of get into some talk about Joe. How did you come, to be the person that was picked to write the book about him?
Well, that story goes back to actually the Lone Ranger again, because I'll just skip away for a second when I grab my other book. I had ran across. I love the Lone Ranger, and this is really cool. I love the art. Who is the artist? The artist is, of course, Tom Gill. And so I had found some Lone Ranger artwork, and then I found it came from Mick Lefevre in New York. And Mick said, yeah, if you want to talk to Tom, here's his number. Just give him a call. So I gave Tom a call, and he answered, which was pretty cool. And keep in mind, when I first talked to him, he was probably 85. Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably 85. And we had a lot of conversations over the years after I first met him on the phone, and we became really good friends over the phone. And we were talking one day, and he'd go, my book. And he could hear his wife, Trish, going, don't talk about the book. And he'd go, okay. And we talk, and he goes, don't talk about. So eventually I said, Trish, tell me about the book. And he goes, no, this is fine. I'll tell him. So it was about the adventures of the early cartoonists as they traveled to overseas on like the Bob Hope tours, USO tours, except the cartoonists of America. I'm blanking on the name of the organization. National Cartoons of America. Anyway, they all the members who do daily strips are part of it. And he goes, it's a book I wrote on tour photos and things like that, but I can't get a publisher. So I went, okay. So he goes, send it to me, Tom. He goes, okay. And Trish goes, I don't know. Don't get him excited. He's going to have a heart attack. And he was like 89 at the time. And so we worked hard trying to find a publisher. And in the middle of that, he goes, I had some students as well, because he taught at the School of Visual Arts in New York. He was a master teacher. He was one of the first teachers from 1947 to 2000. Oh gosh, he taught to 94 at least. So he taught almost 50 years at the school. And his students included Steve Ditko, Joe Sinnott, John Tartagloni, I don't know how you pronounce that name, John T. But it included superstars that you can't imagine. He brought in Will Eisner to the school to teach continuity in 1973. Just did so many things. And he started Chalk Talks, and when he says, well, you can talk to my friend Joe, because I was going to write an article on Tom going, this was a career to memorialize, because no one had ever done that. So I talked to a bunch of people in the newspapers he worked at, fellow artists he mentored and taught and worked with, and Joe was one of them. So that was probably 2004, 2003. I talked to Joe the first time, and we were immediate friends. It was just so cool. So that's how I met Joe initially, through Tom. And then Tom, and when I did the book, there's a picture of Joe and Tom together. They met for lunch in Saugerties one time. And that's a really cool picture. So as we went on, we developed more friendships. Tom passed away, and then I just continued on with Tom. So I wrote the book on Tom, and Joe was part of that. And then when I wrote the book on Joe, I had done the same thing. And let's write a book on Joe. And I talked to John Morrow at TwoMorrows, and he goes, sure. So I had started by writing a piece for Comic Buyer's Guide, and that turned into the book on Joe. So, but in the process, I talked to everybody, a lot of people he worked with. I've still got in my binder all of the phone numbers for Barry Windsor Smith, Terry Austin, oh gosh, Donnie Heck, Jim Mooney, Sal Buscema, everybody's phone numbers are still, because I made these calls, sent emails. It was so cool. It was just so I entered his world with his blessing, and it turned into a really great book. Couple typos. Every book has typos. So did Jim Amish. His is the entry that got messed up because it somehow reverted back, but it got corrected. And in the process, instead of, if you've ever read a TwoMorrows book, or a lot of books, they do question, what did you think of when you're doing Fantastic Four number 199? Why did you do that panel? Answer, I did this because I liked it, type thing. It's dull. You can't read them. It really is. So I figured, if I'm going to write a book on Joe, I'm going to turn it into a real biography. And it reads like you're beside Joe, like he's there right beside you. If you've read it, you know what I mean. You know, it's like it's his voice, it's his words. If you knew what his voice sounded like, you could hear him saying it. And that's what I aimed for. I didn't want a normal book that people go, oh, I'm putting this on my shelf. I wanted a book that people could sit and read in one sitting and go, I love this book. Along the way, they provided hundreds of pages of scans, which I still have, in 2 binders, actually. They're all signed, I think, by Joe on the back. So I've got about 200 pages of signed Joe Sinnott on the back. But it was such an experience to find out how loved he was, how respected he was. It doesn't matter what company he worked for, whether it was Gold, Key, was Dell, was Archie, DC. If you wanted a book done, you tried to get Joe to do it.
So how long did it take you to put together the first book?
Oh, boy. I'm thinking so long back now, probably 2 years. Year and a half, 2 years. I was working full time then too, so it was a lot of just time at night. I remember getting the first pack of artwork, and I worked at a gas station, and I got the box and I took it with me. And I opened it on the counter, and everybody that came in, I showed them these pages of Joe Sinnott artwork, and that was so cool. I remember that. It was like a kid in a candy store. So 2 years of a lot of research, a lot of interviews, transcribing, fact checking. It was just, if you've ever written a book like that, it's tough to do a good job. Anyone can do a question and answer. You transcribe an interview. It's simple. They're easy books. but it's harder to do one that talks in the voice of the individual, whether it's an artist, a writer, or a, athlete. It's difficult.
So, tell me a little bit about the second book. Is that kind of like a continuation of the first book, or just?
Well, there's a story behind the second book. I had got a call from Hermes Press to say, let's do a book on Joe Sinnott. Another guy had started it and backed off. We couldn't finish it. I want you to finish it. And to make a long story short, to be as kind as possible, the book is not being published. There was not enough sales at the time to warrant it. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say on that. That one okay. I did spend probably about 6-8 months, a year working on that one too, updating the previous book I had done because I owned the copyright on it. Oh, gosh. Give me a second. It's my mom. Da-da-da. Okay, anyway, Mom. So
it's okay.
And I was saying, oh yeah, it was just a lot more research, expanding some sections, taking some sections away, and it just didn't turn out for a variety of reasons. The collaboration wasn't organic. I guess that's the way to put it. Mm-hmm. Had it gone through, it would have been very beautiful presentation, and I hope it would have been sparkling text. But what do you do? Yeah. But at the time Joe was alive, and the Joe other book was still selling well. So maybe the appetite wasn't there for another one. It's not quite like a Stanley book. You can write 10 of them and they all sell. Mm-hmm. Because every Stan Lee story has 2 sides, or 3 sides, or 4 sides. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. You know what I mean, right? And with a guy like Joe, there was one side. It was Joe's side. It was the mm-hmm. truth. It was all kind. It was all done with a heart of compassion and respect for people he worked with.
Was there anything in particular that you found interesting about maybe his life or some of his work that you found out while putting together the book?
Well, the first time I went to New York after we had published the book, and Joe treated me to. My wife and I went to New York, and we met Joe at New York Comic Con 2008, and it was awesome. It was like a hero's homecoming. I mean, Joe introduced me to all of his friends on the way in on Saturday morning. And Saturday morning, we were walking in, and I run across Will Murray and Tony, the guy that does all the Shadow Doc Savage books, and they asked me to man their booth for like an hour while they go do something. So I did that. That was pretty cool. How many people does that happen to? Like I knew Will and I knew the Tony, and he goes, "Can you watch my booth, Tim?" I said, "Sure." So I watched the booth and came back, and then I walked in and kept on going, and we're going in, and we're walking up to the table, and we're looking at a section, and Joe goes, "Hey, Gary," and it's Gary Friedrich. So we talked to Gary Saturday morning, and then we keep on moving, and we walk by Jim Steranko's table, and he goes, "Hi, Jim." He goes, "Hi, Joe. Who's this?" "This is Tim." "Oh," and I knew Jim from interviewing him. So it was weird. He introduced me to all of his friends on the way in. And then we got to his table, and I signed a bunch of books for him to sell. Mm-hmm. And he signed them, and it was just so cool because I wasn't going there as just a regular attendee. I was going there as the man who wrote Joe's story, and everybody loved it. On the way by, we walked by George Perez's table, and George was Joe goes, he goes, "Oh, George goes, "Hi, this is Tim." He goes, "Tim Lasiuta?" Goes, "Tim." Goes, "Yeah." He goes, he shook my hand, and he stands up, comes out from behind his table. He goes, "No, Tim, it's my honor to meet you." That was an amazing book on Joe, and I'm so thankful that you did that. That was so cool, because at the time he was at, like for George to do that, he never got out from his booth. He couldn't. He was too busy all the time. So you know, what else can I tell you about that experience? We did that on the way back. I can't even know. Then he takes me to Joe Jusko. Then he takes me over to Carmine Infantino was there, and then he was right beside. Not Gil Kane was gone. Dickie Ayers was there with his son. A little further, so it was Golden Age Alley, and he introduced me to all of his friends in Golden Age Alley. So. And that was cool. And during his panel, and they had a panel on Golden Age comics. So there was Carmine, there was Joe, there was Ramona Fraden, Joe Simon was there as well. And when it was Joe's turn to talk, because they interviewed everybody up top, and he goes, I've done this and this, and I'd like to point out Tim Lasiuta, my good friend who wrote my biography. If you haven't bought it, holds one up, who's buy it. Great book. And stand up, Tim. So he said, stand up, Tim. I want to recognize you in this. And I thought that was so classy.
Do you have a favorite piece of work that Joe did?
Well, he did several pieces for me specifically. Like he did a Lone Ranger, a Tonto. I'll show you the Lone Ranger he did.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he did that for this book. I got a bunch of Tontos he's done. He would just draw pictures for me. He'd say, "Hey, and when he bought the book, see, I've got some of the last remaining copies. He got a Dr. Doom. I'll get that straight. Dr.
Yeah,
Doom. There it is. Yeah.
Very
original
nice.
Stuff. So things like that. I mean, but the thing that I would do with these is I would take these books. I'm going to a show. I would sell them, whatever. And then some of the guys, I was going, hey, well, can I sign your book? And I'd go, okay. So I took a book and I'd get signatures. All through the book. So all the way through the book, there's probably 60 signatures of artists. Jeff Isherwood, Mark Texiera, Steve Englehart, Pache, Brett Bleeding, Tom DeFalco, Ruth Gilbertson, Fernando Ruiz, Richard Starkings, Colin Gurley, Gibson Quarterly, Bob Layton, Dan Perrant, Jeff Isherwood, Billy Windsor Smith, Malcolm Jones, and I got a couple like that. So, the thing about it is, it's created an interesting collectible, but at the same time a memory book for me, because they went, I love this book enough to say I want to do this. Then I'd sell them a book. Okay, it was a little commercial, but but the advantage of all that is it really demonstrated one thing about Joe, and anybody who knew Joe well enough can appreciate the compassion and love he had for people and wanting to encourage people. Mm-hmm. He was never one to say, I'm the guy that did it. No, I'm just the inker. I'm just the inker. When he did the Fantastic Four, he wasn't go, I'm the guy that made Jack look good. No, I just interpreted the lines that were there. Jack is good on his own. John Buscema's good on his own. Will Rubenstein's good on his own. Dickie Ayers is good. Anybody is good. No, he never inked Dickie Ayers. So anybody, I just enhanced what they did. But he did it with such a style, and he corrected so many things that people did wrong. And he did it selflessly, It was pretty cool. I drawn a picture once, and I was going to get him to ink it, and he never had time because he was too busy doing Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And he really was semi-retired at 89, so what do you do? But he was just a kind man. So that was the first time we went to see him. We saw him in New York, hung around with him, went with him on the bus to the convention, and it was just a pleasant day, a really great day. We went to see him last year, my wife and I. Mm-hmm. And so we normally they have cartoonist dinners. Now, I don't know if you know about the cartoonist dinners that they used to have. You would have guys like the Simonsons, Terry Austin would show up. You'd have the Statons, Joe and Hillary. You would have Bailey Windsor Smith sometimes would show up. Like 10, 15 cartoonists would show up and just at a restaurant in Saugerties and just have pasta
Yeah.
And they'd go to Mark's place, or they'd go to Terry's house. Because when you're in Saugerties, if you know the area, which I know you do, you know, how far is it to go to Kingston? 20
Yeah.
minutes.
Yes.
Go to Joe's house or go to Barry's house. No, they never went to Barry's house. Terry was like 10 minutes away, I think. They'd have a dessert at somebody's house. And we had gone, and they were trying to arrange dinner for me, my wife and I, to go visit. And it was a day before last year's Albany Con. So we had done this on a Friday night because we couldn't get people to come in on Thursday night, and no one could make it because Taylor usually arranged it and he couldn't do it for some reason. So it was kind of a small dinner, but the Statons and my wife and I and Joe and Mark and his wife were there. And it was pleasant. Then we went back to Joe's place. Have you ever been to Joe's place, Chad?
No.
Oh my. I was upstairs. He's got artwork downstairs. He's got probably 80 to 100, no more than that, maybe 200 pages of Kirby art in his basement. Like annuals, he's got full issues, Fantastic 493, the full Beatles book. He's got, art from everything he's done. He's just probably 250 pages of original art. I saw an original Jack Kirby Silver Surfer poster, pencil. 24 by 36. And I think he later light boxed it and turned it into a poster. But just crazy. And then he had a stack of original Spidey art. And then you go upstairs into a studio. All of his awards. So we were up in the studio. His comic book, every book he's worked on is up in the studio. And ever since I met Joe, I felt I was part of the family. Joe made sure that I knew that I was part of the Sinnott family. And Mark is the same. Mark is the same.
Well, I know that Joe was very well respected and well loved, by some of by pretty much, by everyone here in the Albany area and all the creators. I know that when there was a con like at Albany, then, everybody, would take time to, at least go over and say hi to him.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's it. I was part of the family. I really was. And, it was so neat, and Mark and I, we still talk to each other sometimes. And, it's hard for them, but, Joe's he's got to deal with a lot of stuff because Joe left a lot of positive behind.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you handle a legacy? How do you manage a legacy like that? Right.
Right.
It's now the Joe Sinnott estate collection of artwork, which is worth $20 million or $50 million or whatever. Some of those pages I saw, the $50 million, $1 million pages. I know that. I saw $2 million pages and those were hanging in his walls. That's not something you see in everybody's house.
No.
I won't tell you what they are, but it was just cool, and but the legacy is not of the value of the page isn't important. What was important to Joe was storytelling, to make it as good as good as it could be, which is why he was the go-to man for Marvel for so long. You wanted to do a book when they did Nova #1. Who did you want to do the cover in the first cover in the book? You wanted Joe. So Buscema and Joe did it. You wanted to do Miss Marvel. Who did it? Buscema and Joe. That was the way it worked, right? His commission life was great. He did a lot of commission for people, and who knows how many was he really did. He signed freely, as you're well aware, because he just wanted to inspire people to do things.
Yeah, I know. I've just when I was out at, with some of the local creators, I saw some of the pieces that Joe did for them, and they were really nice.
Yeah, no, they certainly are. He did some amazing pieces, and I always say this, and that if you are musical and you listen to a good musician, you want to learn to play music well. If you're a writer and you read a well-written book or series of books, you want to write. You want to excel, right? if you're an artist or artistic and you see a good artist, you want to draw. You want to pick up that brush, you want to ink it. And that's what Joe did. He left behind the legacy of his skill that obviously has touched so many people. Hence the Inkwell Awards, Joe Sinnott inking challenge, right? You know, the last book they did, #6, and he signed half the book before he died. And I did a forward for one of them. I turned mine into a Twilight Zone commercial. Actually, it was a Twilight Zone episode of Joe Sinnott's life.
Nice.
It turned out really good, I thought. It was kind of fun. But you know, I actually there's the real Joe Sinnott, and then there's the fictional Joe Sinnott. Let me tell you about the fictional Joe Sinnott. The fictional Joe Sinnott is a super spy. It's true. For a publisher, we did it was can't remember the name of the series now. The idea was you get these people are all trained, so they're called action whenever there's something that goes on. Well, Joe Sinnott was one of those guys. I called him Jonesy. Changed his name. You know, he is superstar artist type thing, inker, and he gets called out, and his name is Stonemason. Well, he saves John Diefenbaker and the mayor of New York from assassination in Times Square. I think I made it 59, if it's 1960 or something. And so he becomes a superhero. And part of the thing is I have him walking through Clancy Street and stopping at the restaurants and things that, you know, that he would have seen his name if he lived in New York at that time. So I really spruced him up as an agent. And the end of the story, he finds the assassin that's going to try that's kill him, and he jumps off a neon sign that's like 250 feet above the ground to get this guy. He was on the antenna, and he lands on this guy in the hospital. So this guy dies, and Joe's in the hospital, and because his kids and family don't know anything about his life as a super spy, they tell him he got hit by a bus. And
nice.
it's a great little tribute story. And it's all about Joe and his superpowers, and he's just he's got the weapons and he can do, and he's a super agent, and it was great to do.
Sounds like a very fun story.
Oh, I love doing it. I absolutely love doing it. I didn't put Tom Gill on that one. That was another one I did. I did another story, and I put Tom Gill into a Lone Ranger story I did. Last chapter, of course. You can't put it in the beginning because people wouldn't know. But I'll show you a couple things that Mark sent me. You probably haven't seen this. It's the funeral card from the. I don't know if you've seen it.
I can see that. Yep.
I got this from Mark the other day. Yeah, it's an Irish blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rain fall soft upon the fields. Until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. And that was his life. See, part of Joe's character wasn't that he has a great talent. He was a great talent. He was a hard worker. His early life, he actually worked in a stonemason place. He worked in a stone quarry because his dad ran it. And he also, you know, there's ice at the time was cut out of the Hudson River, and that was part of what his dad did. And his dad, he did that for a while, and he goes, get to school, son, stay warm. So that's why he went to School of Visual Arts and took Tom's classes. But one thing that for Joe that was so significant, and it's significant for everybody, is that he wasn't blinded by the lights of who Stan was, or they were friends, lifelong friends. He had such a faith in God that kept him humble and gave him compassion for people. And that's what kept him who he was. And that showed through in all the books he did. It showed in the Pope John Paul VI biography he did. It showed in the book he did for Treasure Chest. That is what kept him humble. That's what kept Tom Gill humble. You know, and that's what keeps me grounded is the same thing, because you realize that what I can do, what you can do in your daytime life, or even this, isn't because you're good. Because we're given gifts and talents to use. And Tom knew that. Joe knew that. You know? And that's really his a big thing about his family and what his legacy is. Everybody around him knew that. You spent time with him, you knew that. He wasn't a vulgar man. I don't even, you probably never heard him swear, and I never did. I talked to him lots. And he might have got mad, but he wasn't a guy, there's some people bleep every second. That's not him. Never was, So, the experience of doing the book really opened a lot of doors, though. You do a book like that, and people say, "You did that book?" Well, I had a book done on me. I want you to do it. And I've had 2 or 3 opportunities to do that. The difficulty is that sometimes those are really hard books to do, because I know what it took last time to do it. Mm-hmm. And some of the people that have asked me, it would be a 2-year job to do biography.
And that was kind of going to be one of my last questions was, are there any other, artists that you would, like to do something like this for?
Obviously, certainly. I mean, there's, I would love to do one on Marshall Rogers, but one's being done. I pitched it to a few people, and some people have already apparently started one. I wanted to do one on Don Newton, and somebody had started one a couple of years ago, and I don't know what status that's at, because they're my other favorite artists. But the whole biography section, if you want to call it that, of the catalogs now, there's a lot of artists that have been done, a lot of obscure artists that have been done. Mm-hmm. You find out what they really did. I think I would still like to do Marshall Rogers' book, because he impacted me, and I know people that knew him in real life. I mean, Steve Englehart knew him, obviously. Terry Austin knew him. My friend Paul Powers knew Marshall, knew Don, knew those guys, and there's stories they have that you probably wouldn't imagine. And a lot of those guys were private, so mm-hmm. It takes a lot. Again, the research time is pretty intense. And to locate original art for Don Newton, for instance, even though he seemed to have a lot of output, he really didn't, because he did work. You think about it, from professional work from 1973 to 1986, approximately, something around there, like 12, 13 years. Mm-hmm. But he put a lot of books out. He did a lot of Phantom books. He did some mystery books for Charlton. He did. A lot of DC books. He did Captain Marvel, obviously. He did Batman, did an amazing Batman series. But there's really not a lot of his art out there. So to fill a book with artwork, you got to work really hard to try and get scans of original art.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Marshall Rogers. Marshall really only had if you want to use the word shelf life, 1976 to about 25, but really, realistically, probably 15 years of real artwork, because he took time off to do other work for video game companies. Mm-hmm. And once again, I mean, what is the ones that he's most known for? Batman and Captain Marvel, or Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle. And again, those books are Grail pages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If the splash page for Detective 474 ever came up with that long coffin shot of Batman is dead, ever came up for sale, how much would that go for?
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it would probably exceed it'd be $100,000.
Way out of my budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And so somebody's got it in their collection. I know his sister had sold some. She had 20 pages of Marshall Rogers artwork left last year, and I bought some. I got 3 pages of Marshall artwork original, which is cool. I'm excited. And one thing I've got is, collectors of weird things, right? I'm assuming you're a collector. If I were to name the top 3 comics I've got that are signed of sorts, one is my signed Roy Rogers Canadian Annual #1 from 1951. There's only 5 copies in existence. Mine signed.
Wow.
So it could be 5,000, 10,000. It comes at Overstreet, $800. But I've seen them all up for sale, so people want to sell them.
Yeah.
The other one is a signed Lone Ranger book. It's a Clayton Moore cover, so Clayton Moore signed it. Tom Gill, the writer. Tom Gill, the artist. Sorry, Paul Newman, the writer, and I have another signature of an inker in there. 4 signatures on Lone Ranger book from 1955. That's
Wow.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
The other one I've got is a Detective 474, 476. I think the Laughing Joker cover, which alone is worth quite a bit. Well, my book has signatures from Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers, Terry Austin, the letterer, and the colorist.
Oh wow!
5 signatures on that book. 5 of them. And the way I got that was I had sent it to Steve, and he was going for luncheon with them, and I had sent him some books, and he said, "Listen, do you want those signed?" I said, "Sure." And he goes, "I might have some extras of the Batman, the new Dark Detective 2. Do you want that signed too, Tim?" I went, "Yeah, if you got some, why not?" Right? So I've got 5 signatures on Dark Detective 2 for one book and for the first one.
Wow.
Those, can you sell those? No. Those are museum pieces. Really.
Yeah.
And they were done at one time. I went sitting in a restaurant. They passed it around while they had pasta or chicken or something. So along the way, I've gotten into some really intriguing collectibles from these guys. I've got, letters from Tom Gill. I've got, stuff from Joe and his kids. I don't have the last email I got from Marshall Rogers because, Hotmail deletes things after a while. Yeah. I lost a lot of valuable emails. Oh, gosh.
Oh, wow.
I lost a series of emails with Philip Jose Farmer. We were discussing him doing a Doc Savage story. And it's gone.
Oh, wow.
Deleted. The Marshall Rogers one says, we talked about him not feeling well. And, what do I do? Do I sign these and send them? And I said, yeah, just sign them, Marshall, and send it back. I appreciate it. And we talked a couple times and gone. Wow. Marie 7, the same thing. DC Fontana, the same thing. Star Trek writer, those are gone. Gone in email land. And, some things I wish, if we had lived in the letter age, I have these. I'd have signatures in the bottom, the letter, the whole deal. But I was smart enough when I interviewed Johnny Severin to write him letters. So Johnny Severin wrote me letters back.
Wow.
Russ Heath wrote me letters back. So I got letters from Russ Heath. Got Don Spalding. The coolest one, I think, and I don't know what much time I want to end on this story because it shows the value of people in a career of like this, in this family of creative people, right? I had met Mike Royer because Mike had worked with Jack, and he helped me with the Ray Rogers book I did for Hermes Press. That's another shameless pitch. Ray Rogers collected comic strips, Hermes Press, great book. But he had sent some stuff to me, and I got a friendship with him, and he told me about different things when he worked at Gold Key and Charlton and Dell and those things. And he was well known in the industry. And the people he worked with included guys who worked on the Ray Rogers comic strips. Now, this particular guy died in a motorcycle accident. He was kind of a conspiracy theorist in 1971, 72. He was motorbiking back from the Disney studio, and he hit a gravel road going up to his bomb shelter he was building, because he was building a bomb shelter. And he hit some gravel, and he wiped out and died. And Mike Roy was the last guy to talk to him alive. So that was that story, and we talked a little bit about that. So fast forward a little while, I get to know this man's son through a couple of things, and he goes, "I don't know anybody that knew Dad," and I'm going to give the name for a second. Once I blanked on it, the story I remember, but he goes, "I don't know anybody that knew Dad." I said, "Well, Mike Vallejo did." He goes, "Who's Mike?" Well, he would look at any of the Winnie the Pooh artwork for Disney and things. That's what he did. Oh, but he knew your dad. He was the last man to have a conversation with your dad. He goes, "He was?" Because I was 5 when my dad died. I have no memories of my dad. So I put my friend in touch with Mike. So he got to hear from the last man who heard his dad's voice and tell him about his dad. That's the power of a community like this. That's the power of people's stories, right? Joe's book is the same. This is his life. This is his legacy. His legacy is his care for people, and that's. And I wish I remember the name of that guy. I just blanking on it. I know what they called him in the books, because they gave the wrong names on the register. If you give me 2 seconds, I'll get it for you. Here it is. Mike is it's Mike Aarons.
Okay.
He did Scamp and everything. So his son is Michael Aarons as well. And in Michael Aarons Jr.'s house are hundreds of original pieces of artwork from Roy Rogers, from animation studios that he worked for. And he knew nothing about them.
Wow.
So I was able to connect with them and educate him on them. This is the book.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Anyway, and that's sort of how I want to end this, is like all of your guests, you're doing, I had a radio show for a while with Vince Zuzzolo, always got his name wrong, in New York for comic, for his major, like incredibly successful auction house now. And he had a radio show, and I took it over for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thankful. He trusted me enough to say, do my show, because he realized I could do that. But I created a lot of friends out of that. I interviewed Gene Colan. I interviewed Jim Mooney. I interviewed Steve Englehart, Joe Sinnott, obviously, Stan Lee, probably 30 interviews. And they're available through download. You can still get them. But I did the same thing. I wanted to humanize them. This is you have the chance to tell a story, because Jim Mooney was gone a year later.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you do, and I know what it's like. It's awesome. It's so much fun.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's fun. It's fun, and it was very informative. Hearing your stories and all that. So go ahead. You can go ahead, and if you'd like, where can people find your stuff?
They can look for me on. I do have a webpage. It's Tim Lasiuta, LASIUTA.weebly, WEEBLY.com. Or they just search for me on the internet. You'll find about a million things, because I'm a historian as well, not just in comic books. I live in Alberta. I'm active with the Native communities, helping them preserve their history. I ran for city council. I write articles for a website called todayville.com. I just do a lot of things because I'm intensely curious, and I have no sense of boundaries when it comes to curiosity. But I do have. But we recently moved, and I found out how many books I really had, and we all know what that's like. I've got this office here, and I've probably got, I'm betting 500, 600 reference books on comics and things in here. I've got a lot more in the garage, and there's hardcovers. And a lot of people, when they move, they get rid of books. And it's hard to do. If you've ever moved, you know what it's like. What do I keep? What do I get rid of? Garage sales don't work, but I really realize how thankful I am that I've got a lot of these books signed by people. I started getting books signed by writers, but so not by writers, by artists for paperbacks. Why not? So some Philip Jose Farmer books I have are signed by the artist as well as Philip, which is kind of cool. Because they never get asked to.
Right.
So, and our kids will never realize the value of these. Your kids are young, I'm assuming, unless we explain it to them, unless they show interest. So shows like this go a long way to help us. And that's what I can tell you. Just search my name if you're interested. You can put a contact off me. People want to email me and ask questions. I'm more than willing to answer questions. And I'd like to end with Joe's prayer, may the road rise to meet you. To me, that's significant.
Okay. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Oh, thank you for your time. And, I'm glad we finally got to connect.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, I also know a lot about old time radio shows. That's another thing I didn't talk about. But anyway, there's a few things there. But the reality is that I really got to stop trying to collect so much.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? Amen to that.
All right. Well, I'll let you go and have a good evening. And thanks again for taking the time.
No problem. Have a great night.
All right. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.